Hey guys, Bogle here. If you are watching this video, you probably own a Krawju or you're certainly thinking about it. In this video, we're gonna go over all the different parts and the absolute easiest way to assemble this so that way you have the most fun. It's actually a really good time putting it together and you feel like you had a hand in it. Being down here in Louisiana and from the swamps, I always thought the South needed its own kaiju, and now we finally have it. So thank you for your support, thank you for getting the figure, or thank you for even considering it. It's been a really awesome journey, and I'm happy to bring it to you. Let's get into it and get this guy together.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and start off with talking about a couple of tools that are going to help make this easier. First, we're going to start off with a heat gun. You don't have to have a heat gun, but it does help it go a lot quicker. A blow dryer will work just fine, but a $20 heat gun will really help make the process quicker. I suggest some needle nose to help pull some of the smaller parts through the holes, makes it a lot easier. And this is a little tool set that you can get from Harbor Freight for literally $2, but it just makes poking and manipulating the vinyl into place much easier. And of course, some X-Acto knives to help trim a couple pieces that you might need to trim along the way. That's not always the case, but every now and then a part comes along where we do need to trim it to make the parts fit a little tighter. So we're going to go ahead and get the parts out of the bag, put all the extra goodies back in the crawfish sack, and set it to the side. So once I have all the parts undone and unwrapped, I'm going to go ahead and start with the feet. I do recommend doing this in the process in which I'm doing it because it's going to make the whole thing go much smoother and easier and fit more tightly. So go ahead and take the feet and get them ready. I will take the bag labeled toenails, go ahead and dump all of those out. Each toenail has a number that is pressed and corresponded to where it should go. So based off of the instructions, I lay those out in place. That way I can just grab them and plug them in, and I'm making sure the right toenail goes into the right toe hole. Then he'll stand nice and flush and clean. So I go ahead and take the first foot, give it a little bit of heat so the nail can come through the holes pretty easily. Just heat the whole part up pretty softly and give the nail a good amount of heat so it can come through the hole without any kind of resistance. I take the sharp end of the nail and I pull it through the hole until it clicks into place. It's pretty obvious how it clicks in and how it fits. So again, I heat it up, I take the pointed end and I push it through, rotate it as I pull, and click right into place. It's very satisfying and pretty self-explanatory on what to do. This is where the needle nose come in, and I heat the smaller point up so I'm not heating up the tips of my fingers. And again, I take that and then come in through the inside and just pull it through until it clicks in. It's pretty easy to do, and it's all pretty obvious once you see it in person. So after getting the toenails in place, I'm going to set the feet to the side for now, and we're going to go ahead and move on to the back spikes of the torso. I made sure to grab a Krawju that needed a little bit of extra trimming. They don't all need this, and it's actually kind of rare, but sometimes I do come across one where the factory didn't trim it quite clear enough. So I wanted to do this in case you have one and you needed to do this. We're doing it together. So I give the vinyl a little bit of heat to soften it up, and then I take an X-Acto knife and I just trim the part a little closer to where the spike and the back of the torso meet. That way it's just a nice clean fit. You don't have to do this, but it does make the parts fit cleaner and tighter together. So it's not really a big deal at all, just a little bit of heat and a little bit of trim. But in case you do have one that needs this, I wanted to do it with you. That way you know what to do and what to expect. So I'm going to undo the bag of back spikes. The whiskers for the portrait are in this pack, so go ahead and find those and set those to the side. When we do the portrait, we'll pull those back out. But again, I find that it's a lot easier to take the parts and to go ahead and organize them in the way that the instructions label them. That way you can just grab them and plug them in accordingly. It just helps it go a little quicker, and it makes sure you're putting the right spike into the right hole. So we're going to start off with the first one, and we are going to heat up the torso just a little bit so that way it slips through a little easy. and we're gonna take the main spike and heat that up as well. Give it a good amount of heat so it makes it nice and soft. And again, just like the toenails, we're gonna come in from the inside of the torso and pull them out of the hole. That's gonna make this whole process a lot easier, and you're not trying to fit a big wide wad of vinyl in through a small hole. So through the inside and just pull it until it clicks. You can see the click right there, and just wiggle it around until it fits flush. It's pretty obvious where it goes and how it happens. So if you get any kind of folds in the vinyl, you have the opportunity to put your hands in there and flatten it out. But I'm gonna go ahead and repeat the steps for all of the spikes. So give them a heat and pull them from the inside of the torso out. Sometimes the needle nose pliers make this a little easier for them to pull in and click. It's all pretty obvious, and it's actually really satisfying when they click right into place. And while they're still soft, I give them a little movement and twist them to just point in the right direction and make them look as good as possible. And there you have it. All the spikes are in place. They look great. And we're going to go ahead and work on putting the upper mantle onto this part of the torso. So again, this part needed a little bit of extra trimming. They don't all need this, but every now and then I come across one that does. So I made sure to find one that needed this, and I'm just making sure that the vinyl is trimmed all the way up to the part's edge. So when we put the upper mantle onto the torso, they fit really clean and snug. I've noticed that some people were having a little bit of issue with getting this part onto the torso, but if you do it in this particular way, it makes it a lot easier to do, and it'll just go a lot quicker. So I heat up the main torso there, get that soft. This is what I call the mantle. It's the upper torso, and I'm going to give this a good amount of heat. That flared bottom part is going to go inside of the torso, and that's what's going to hold it into place. So make sure that you heat it up really well. Keep it a good 4 to 6 inches away from the heat gun so you don't burn the vinyl. But with enough heat, you see how soft the part is getting. I'm just going to make it really nice and soft where it's easily workable. And I start with that back cornered groove there. That'll kind of lock the part into place. And then just push with your fingers. Just push that flared inside the torso. The part should be nice and soft, so it shouldn't give you a whole bunch of resistance. Take advantage of having the armholes and the portrait hole open, and just lay that flared part flat inside the torso, and just make sure it's sitting nice and flush and there's no folds in the vinyl. Sometimes once it's in the perfect spot, I will take my thumbs and apply pressure. You see how the vinyl is folding right there? So I go in and I just take my thumbs and hold the flared part down and give it and let it cool for just a minute. Once the vinyl's cool, it'll hold and lock into place. But you see how my thumbs are holding the folds of the vinyl down? I'm just giving it a little bit of time to cool, and once it does, it holds it into place and locks it in. And you don't need glue, you don't need any kind of weird fancy tool to do this part. If you do this before you put the arms and the legs on, it makes the whole thing a lot easier. And there you have it. The upper mantle is connected to the torso, and we're moving on. So now is the tail, and I am giving the entire base of the tail a little bit of heat just to make the whole thing a little bit easier to work. And we're going to put the tail tip onto the tail base. So the tail tip flare is pretty large, and it goes into a kind of a small hole, but that helps really lock it in and hold it into place. So give that a good amount of heat. Again, 4 to 6 inches away from the heat gun, so that way you are not burning it. But start with one end and you can just push it into the other side. Sometimes a little poker tool will help make this work, but if you really just wiggle it back and forth, it locks in. And once the parts meet flush, you know you did it right. So I'm going to give the base of the tail a good amount of heat and put it onto the torso, starting with that top pointed groove and working the sides around. This is where that little poker tool we talked about in the beginning comes in handy, and I'm just going to roll the soft vinyl on top of the lip. It's a little bit like putting a tire on a rim. It's very easy to do. Again, you don't have to have that tool. You can kind of just pull it and move it around with your hand, but that little tool just makes the job a lot easier. And if you're in the soft vinyl world, and you're probably going to be taking a couple pieces apart, it's probably a good thing to have on hand. But again, once it's all fit flush and locked into place, I just set it to the side and let it cool, so that way it becomes nice and rigid. Now we are going to start the process of putting the feet onto the legs. You'll notice that first you want to make sure that the right foot is going onto the correct leg, and I'm going to heat the foot up pretty well, but I'm not going to heat up the ankle. If you heat up both parts and they're too soft, it makes them hard to fit together and they're kind of mushy. So I'll heat the foot up first and get that soft, and then just roll the ankle into the hole just like that until you feel the parts click and they sit flush. While the foot is still warm, make sure that you keep the leg to the side. You don't want to stand it up and have the weight of the leg push down the softness of the foot, because it'll cool that way and he'll slouch. So just once you have the foot on the leg, set it to the side and let them cool that way. Now we're going to move on to the portrait, and I am heating the face up just so that the whiskers can come through the holes. I'm going to start with the right whisker. They both have R and L, and that's Krawju's right and left. So once I heat it enough to where it feels soft, almost kind of like a worm, I go ahead and feed it through the inside and pull it until you feel 3 clicks. There are 3 large nodules on his whisker, and you'll feel them each come through until you reach the backing. So I'm going to heat this part up until it's nice and soft, and then I'm going to feed it through the inside of the portrait through the hole, and then you're going to see the 3 clicks. 1, 2, and 3. That's the 3 clicks until we get to the back. Rotate it until it's straight and set that aside and let it cool. Now we're going to move on to putting the claws on the arms. You're going to notice that the claws have a bulge on one side. That's what I'm showing you right here. So if you notice on this left side that there's a bigger bulge on one side of the claw, that's going to go on the inside of Krawju's arm. So when both claws are on, the bulges of the claws will be on the inside of his body. So I am heating up the claw, but I'm not going to heat up the arm. That's going to make the claw much easier to go around the lip of the arm. And I'm just stretching that soft vinyl across that lip. You can do this just by pushing it on with your hands, but obviously this little tool really makes it a lot easier. It goes just very, very quickly. Those little poker tools are absolutely amazing for $2. So I repeated the steps on the other arm, got the other claw on there, very, very simple. And now we are going to put the leg on the torso. So I'm going to go ahead and start by making sure I have the right leg going to the correct side, and I'm going to heat up the lip of the leg and make that really nice and soft, so I'm not going to have any trouble with fitting this big flare into that smaller hole of the torso. So 4 to 6 inches away from the heat source. Do it until it's nice and soft, and then I'm going to apply a little bit of heat to the socket of the torso just so that I can maneuver both. Not too much. You don't want them both to be too soft. I definitely prefer the leg to be softer, and then I just start in a corner, fold it, and slip it in. If you have any folds in the vinyl or any parts that are being stubborn and not going in the hole, just take your poker tool and just push them through. You can take advantage of having the other arm and leg holes open and just pull the flare through the hole and just make sure it's sitting nice and flush, and then just let it cool down. I am now repeating the same steps for the other leg and making sure that it fits good. It's all pretty obvious where it should go. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to putting the arms on the torso. So the sockets of the arms are a pretty thick vinyl, and that's what holds the big claws into place and allows you to pose them and position them. So give it a good amount of heat to where it's nice and soft, and then I'm going to heat up the socket as well. Fit the plug into the hole using our poker tool. We're just going to make sure all of the plug is inside of the torso. And yeah, just work it around until the whole thing is in there. It clicks in, it's pretty easy, and then we're going to repeat the same steps on the other side until both our arms and legs are on Krawju himself. Now the final part is putting the portrait on. I'm going to heat up the neck or the flare of the portrait until it's pretty soft, and we're just going to slip it into the mantle hole at the top. I don't heat up the mantle hole, you don't really have to. The face is probably the easiest part to put on, so just when it feels nice and soft, you can remove it from the heat and just stick it in, fold it, and it'll pop back into place. If you have any folds in the vinyl, just squeeze and manipulate the head until they flare out, and then the vinyl will cool and lock the whole thing into place. And that is pretty much it for assembling him. And the last bit of advice, guys, is once he is all completed, to go ahead and let him cool down on his back. If he feels warm and a little soft to the touch, you don't want to stand him up because the weight of him will cause him to slouch and he'll cool in that position. So just make sure you lay him on his back and let him cool all the way down. I usually give it about an hour, and then you'll notice the whole thing is substantially more rigid and he just stays in his pose a lot easier. This is what he should look like after, and yeah, you're welcome to pull his arms off and pull his other parts off and fill him with whatever you want. Sometimes I do yarn, sometimes I do paper or beads or something like that, but I encourage you to make it your own. Take pictures, share it on social media, and make sure you send it to the Tolzar social medias. That way we can just see the followers holding their new Messiah in their own place and what you guys do with him. I love seeing how creative people get with this guy. And if you guys have any questions at all, please reach out to the email. You can also find a bunch of information on tolzartoys.com. Thank you for going on this journey, and we'll catch you on the next one.
My name came up a lot of sounds, more when I was not around. Certain people that I know, they ain't no longer about. My name came up a lot of sounds, more when I was not around.